Good morning, cuties and comrades. Today is another beautiful day in history, and we've got critical work to do. I'm Sarah Michnik, your critical thinking coach, and today we're going to be talking about an essential piece of being a critical thinker, which is consequences. Critical thinking is consequential. So, what I've been doing this week, and I'm planning on doing every week, is going through these 5 elements of being a critical thinker. So on Monday, we talked about intention. Yesterday, we talked about essential. And today, we're going to talk about how it's consequential. Being a critical thinker means that you think through consequences, that you're good at making decisions. So it's about cultivating important and urgent decision making. So the word critical itself actually hides consequences in it. You wouldn't even know. I'm such a fan of etymology because that way we can dig through the archaeology of what words mean. It's very exciting because they've been pieced together with different fragments of different things. And consequences is hiding right there in plain sight in the word critical. Because critical comes from the Greek word for crisis. So to be a critical thinker in Greek society, in antiquity, was to be able to make decisions in a crisis. To be critical was to be faced with a crisis and be able to make the right choice when faced with such an urgent crisis dilemma. You know what to do because you're a critical thinker. So crisis is built right in to that word. So we can handle consequences. So how do I discuss what it means to be consequential? Well, if you've been watching these videos, you might know that I make cards for each of these elements. Woo! And consequences, I've made a lot of cards. There's so much to talk about with consequences. So I'm going to toss these in to my handy dandy of the people, by the people, for the people. Let's unzip it. I should unzip it beforehand, shouldn't I? Not as satisfying of a zipper sound as I would have liked. Okay, put them all in there. Shake it up, shake it up. Reach in from the middle. Let's see what we got. Okay, it seems that if I don't go super close, it's better. Look at that. Okay, I am not surprised that I pulled Jean-Paul Sartre because I think there are more quotes by him in my consequential knowledge of the people, by the people, for the people than anybody else. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher who dealt with consequences a lot. We'll talk more about it. Let me read the quote first. Okay. Our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed because it involves all mankind. Oh, good. I'm glad we're starting with social responsibility. And now that's a big part of the consequences in the material world. Okay, so let me read over my notes on the back real fast. Yes, what consequential is decision making, which we've been talking about. Okay, awesome. All right. So, Jean-Paul Sartre, as I was saying, he was a French philosopher who took from the Marxist tradition, which meant that as Marx looked at history, he was the first one to look at history and say, we judge history by its material happenings. Whatever happened in the material world, we don't know what happened in people's abstracts. We don't know intentions so much. What we know for sure about history are the material consequences. And so this matters a lot. And in fact, Marx argued that it mattered the most, that what happens in the material world in history is what makes history. So human choice before that human choice is right before materialism, right? Every act we make materially shapes the world. And it's important to remember material, like, what does that mean? We have, what is that, an ingredient? It's a thing something's made of. Correct. Material, when we talk about the material world, we're talking about matter that comes from the scientific matter. So when I say material world, I'm not talking about like, I'm a material world, a material girl. Like, yes, that's like scientifically about matter, not about like material things, but yeah, things made of matter. So every move I make in this world with matter, I chose to. I made a choice. Not always, but any act that I have that has been part of praxis, which is action plus reflection, that is material. So all of that I choose to do. So these material consequences, as much, because we, as I said, we don't always choose. Like sometimes I sneeze and I make a material difference. I changed the matter in the world and I didn't ask to. That was just part of what it means to be a human, is sometimes that's the tough thing, is sometimes there's nothing we can do about how we engage in the material world. Sometimes we sneeze. Sometimes something slips out of our choice. Talking is a little different. I think we always choose what we say. On some level, we're choosing to say those words. But there are lots of things I'd say, like physical, instinctual, bodily functions, and when we're not being critical. I'd say if you let something slip that you didn't really mean to, it's because you weren't being intentional. You weren't being critical. And so that's why consequences are so important, is because, yeah, that happens way more than we'd like. We are consequentially, we make an impression on this world whether we choose to or not. Like, too bad, it's happening. You're making a difference in the world somehow, and these consequences matter. And so, to the best of our ability, we want to control as much of our material impact on the world as possible. We're never going to be perfect, but we can try. This is what being critical is all about, trying our best to have the most humanizing impact that we can. And so consequences is a big part of that. So back to Jean-Paul Sartre, now that we've talked about the material world and actions in a world made of matter, where things really matter. Okay, so he's saying our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed because it involves all mankind. So that's the thing. I mean, we hear about it with like the butterfly effect, right? A butterfly flaps its wings and it changes something halfway across the world. Yeah, that's kind of the deal. Whether you like it or not, humans are tied to our impact. And so everything we do, our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed. Anything we do might send ripples out and change all of human history. That's what it means to be in part of this material world. So here, he's hit on something really, really huge and really, really exciting and terrifying. Something I've talked a little bit about reverence and how that's an important part of the knowledge building process when you're trying to be critical. Reverence, the reason I chose it is because it means to honor, but it also has religious connotations. It has a religious history, and it also, people revered God. He was wonderful, but he was also terrible, right? To have power is wonderful and terrible. We can do anything. God could do anything. That's why he was revered, right? And is revered. That's why that's part of like this fear of God has always been part of reverence towards God. And honestly, we should have that perspective for ourselves too. We also should be a little terrified of the consequences that we can make because they're so great. They can be great for good, but they can be terribly great as well. And so he's hit on something really important here, is that we often do not recognize the extent of our own power. We do not comprehend how truly powerful each of our material acts are. It's much greater than we might have supposed. Because guess what? Every act you make, again, whether you like it or not, you're making actions in a material world. You can't escape it. You also can't escape history. Everything you do is now, this is part of the past. It's part of the past. It's part of the past. You are also imprisoned in history, like it or not, part of your condition. And I hate to break it to you, but you're also imprisoned in a social society. As humans, we're social. Hey, are we talking in a language? That's a social construct that was created by people that wasn't us. People outside of ourselves created that language, taught it to us, and now we engage in it because we're social beings. Everything we do has a social element. Sorry, you can't escape it. You can run out to the mountains and live a hermit life, but you will always have a relationship to society. You'll never escape. You might be outside society, but you'll never be free from society. You'll always have a relationship with it, just like you'll always have a relationship to the world of matter and the world of history. You will always have a relationship to the world of society. And that's what Jean-Paul Sartre is talking about. Everything you do involves all of mankind. And that is consequential, my friend. Everything we do impacts everyone else. And so because of that, it is so vital that we learn to be critical decision makers, that we really learn how to harness our impact in this material world, because it's part of history, it's part of society, and it's part of the constant transformation of this world. Everything we do makes it a little better, keeps it exactly the same, or makes it a little worse. Sorry, not sorry. You are, another quote that Jean-Paul Sartre has is that man is condemned to be free. And ain't that the truth? You're condemned to the material world, you're condemned to history, you're condemned to society. But instead of seeing it as a condemnation, which you totally could, it's a pretty pessimistic way of looking at it. And Jean-Paul Sartre is often, he's categorized with the existentialists, though I believe he ended up leaving that type of label for himself. He didn't like it as much, I think. Look it up. Double check on me, because I might not be as critical as I'd like to be with my facts. So fact check me. But existentialists have been seen as negative. Like, oh man, we exist. That's not really, when you look closer, that's not what they are, actually. But there is that first level. Like, we have to reckon with the fact that we are stuck. We are stuck in this material world. We are stuck in history, stuck in society, stuck with our consequences. Ooh, there's no escaping them. And so instead of, we could see it as a condemnation, as I said, or we could see this as an opportunity, right? We can see this as an opportunity. Okay, what a terrible consequence that everything I do has impact. I can let that terrify me, or I can let that empower me. Like, hell yeah, it does. Hell yeah, everything I do impacts history. Hell yeah, it impacts society. Hell yeah, it impacts all of mankind. Hell yeah, my responsibility is greater than I thought. Okay, which means I have critical work to do. I need to work on my decision making to make sure that each and every consequence that I evoke from my choices, from my abstract mind, and that leaves and enters this material world, boy, I need to make sure that I have thought that through and been really critical. So that's a key part of being a critical thinker. And as the weeks go on, every Wednesday, I'll be pulling another consequential card. So we'll keep talking about what this means, because It's a great and terrible power. It's a little frightening, but it's also empowering. So keep that in mind as you move forward with your day. Think about your actions. Every choice you make is part of history, part of our world, part of society. So I look forward to all the consequences of your actions today. I think they're going to be great. They won't be perfect, they never are. But as long as you're being critical and being intentional, we talked about intentionality on Monday. If you're thinking about things that are essential, if you're focusing your attention hard on what is essential, I think you're going to do a good job of making great consequences with your choices. So that's all for today, folks. Remember to be consequential out there and have a colorfully critical day. Bye.